Alright, welcome back to Dr. Fike's Tips and Tricks, and this is video number 5 in the series. And today we're going to talk about one of the most important aspects of any presentation, that is delivery. Be totally honest with you, delivery is one of the most important things, and it's one of the most important factors and most common things that people either report is very good about a presentation or is very bad. In other words, the best content in the world, if the speaker isn't very effective from a delivery standpoint, it's not going to be the best speech ever. And on the other hand, even if the speaker has loose content or maybe the slides are off a little bit, if their delivery is enthusiastic, it's passionate, the gestures are good, the eye contact is positive, it can actually make up for a lot of other sins that the presentation might have. So I really want to focus in on that, and I know many of you, as you were thinking a little bit about what you want to develop in this course, your strengths and your weaknesses and some of your habits, so many of those things are going to be delivery related, so I want to focus on that here today. Now, it's really important to recognize that this obviously is an online course, and so a lot of the aspects of delivery that are important for a speech in person are going to be different than online. So I'm going to kind of speak to both sides of it here. I'm going to speak to some things that are going to help you when you're delivering online, as you are in this class, but also some more general principles and tips and tricks and best practices that apply to delivery, because I'd like for this to help you beyond just this class where you're going to be delivering speeches online. So when we think about delivery, there's a number of really important things. Some delivery components are verbal. So for instance, pausing, saying ums and uhs and those kind of things, and then many of them are nonverbal, so things like eye contact, gestures, etc. So I'm going to focus a little bit on both and just kind of give you from my experience, some of the things that I think are really important. So let's just point out a couple of things, and let's start with two. The first, it will be eye contact. So obviously when you're giving a presentation in an online setting, you want to make sure that you focus on the camera itself, right? And so it's really tempting when you're video conferencing with someone or giving a live stream speech or whatever it is, we have a tendency to kind of wander our eyes around, kind of look around a lot. We have a tendency perhaps to look down at our notes too much, just like we do in an in-person presentation. Or probably the most common is we have a tendency to watch the video feed of ourselves rather than the camera. So in this class, this will be really good practice for you to develop those best practices where you can look right at the camera and make sure that you're making quote-unquote eye contact with your audience. In a normal classroom setting, it's really important to really think about balance, and that's a key term that I want you to think about is balance. So for instance, in a presentation, you want to make sure that you make eye contact with as many people as possible, but you don't want the eye contact to be so widespread, so fast, where people feel like they're watching your head and it's like watching a tennis match, right? So you want to look at every audience member, try to focus on every audience member at least one time, but do it in a way that it's controlled, where it doesn't feel like you're going crazy looking at everybody super fast. So again, that's balance. Second factor I want to talk about are gestures, and you'll think about balance for those as well. You want to have gestures that are natural, but if there's too many of them, then they become distracting, right? Just like if you're talking and you're kind of fidgeting and messing with stuff, that becomes distracting. So we want the gestures to be pretty natural, pretty fluid, but also not to be distracting. In an online setting like this, a key piece that's important is where do you position the camera so that we can see as many delivery cues as possible. So for instance, you can see gestures, but I also don't have my hands in front of my face like this, right? So you just want to be mindful of those kinds of things, and I think this course will be a good opportunity to practice some of those things. One thing about delivery is, again, it's either really good so it makes up for a lot of sins, or it's bad to the point where it's distracting. So you'll see some of those factors and what I'll be looking for when it comes to delivery. And again, a big part of it is just being natural about it. One aspect that's not really as important in an online setting, but that's important is the aspect of movement. So you want movement in a classroom, for instance, around a stage to be natural. You don't want it to be too pacey back and forth. Then it's like watching a lion in a cage, and that becomes distracting. So you just want that to be natural. I would rather see a student who is pretty firm in their posture and upright than one that's kind of slouching around and moving around too much, because that's distracting. So work with what's best for you, with what's comfortable, and again, balance is key. Not too stiff, not too fluid where it's distracting, and just being mindful of that is really important. Last one I want to mention here is really personal appearance. It's important. You don't have to be super dressed up, but I'm a firm believer that when you dress like you're going to give a presentation, like you want people to look at you professionally, I think it helps you be prepared and it helps you get ready for that situation. So you want to dress intentionally. You want your attire to match the situation, just like you would in a job interview. Is the company more strict? Is it more of a tight culture? If it is, then you would want to dress a little more professionally. Otherwise, you might be able to dress down. So again, it's dressing intentionally. Steve Jobs was famous for, he always wore a black turtleneck and jeans. That's what he did, and that look was intentional. It symbolized what Apple is about, which is just simplicity, clarity. It's just simple. So that's what you want to do, is just dress intentionally. So this is a pretty casual look for me, and I think it's appropriate in a situation like this. If it was a business context, I'd probably have a pressed shirt, maybe a blazer. So again, the personal appearance piece is really just about being intentional. The last thing I want to share with you are just a few tips from Simon Sinek, who is a TED speaker. In fact, he's one of the third most watched TED speakers out there. So I would encourage you to watch him. I've actually got one of his TED Talks posted on Blackboard under TED Talks, so I would encourage you to watch that. He's a fantastic speaker, great storyteller, really good from a nonverbal delivery standpoint. So honestly, you could watch him and pick up as many tips and tricks as you could ever need to be successful in a speech. So that's really important. Let me share with you, he has 7 tips for public speaking, and some of these are delivery related, most of them, but not all of them are. So let me just share them with you. The first is, whenever you start talking, don't talk right away. One sign of a nervous speaker is they come out on stage and they start talking before they actually get firmly planted and on stage. So take a second, take a deep breath, and then get started. The second one, which really relates to our second video, is show up to give, not to take. So think about the audience. What are you going to be giving them, right? What's going to be beneficial to them? And that's a really good way to kind of calm your nerves and put you in that situation. And then when you first start, then give it to them. Tell them, hey, this material is going to benefit you because, which relates to the last video that you watched, which was all about what you do in an introduction. You tell the audience what's in it for them. Third tip from Simon Sinek is to make eye contact one by one. He recommends that you try to focus on talking to a certain person and completing a sentence before you move on to another person. If you're in a small classroom, that can get kind of awkward because it's a short presentation and it might feel like you're staring at somebody. So balance that, right? Use it as a general guideline to think about slowing down and making eye contact as opposed to just panning around. Fourth tip, speak unusually slowly. This is one that's really going to help those of you that have the issue that I have, which is the pace. My pace tends to be really fast. Focus on slowing. What Simon Sinek talks about is that if you slow down and you pause, people will wait for you, and it's kind of a cool feeling because they will hang on that. They will hang on those words. So especially when you're telling a story, you want to slow down and let people digest it. You want to process it and take deep breaths, and that'll help you as a speaker as well. So that's definitely delivery related. Fifth tip is ignore the naysayers. This is one of the most challenging parts about speaking to a live audience. It's sometimes we have an over tendency to focus on people's reactions, and if they look bored, if they look angry, whatever it is. One mantra that I use that I think is really helpful is, what's on that person's face is not about me. What's on that person's face is not about me. And that'll really help you. You don't know what someone's going through. They might be sitting back like this because they're processing what you're saying and it's helpful to them. That happens to me all the time when I do corporate trainings. Oftentimes the person that looks the most skeptical, the person who's the most quiet, is the person that's processing and will come up and talk to me the most afterwards. So you just don't know. So ignore people, if they don't look like they're very happy, you just don't know what people are going through. And so you just want to focus on your message and what's going to benefit them and not get too caught up in their nonverbals. Sixth is turn your nervous into excitement. So you're going to be nervous before a presentation. That can actually be a good thing because it means it's important to you. It's at least important for you to look professional, right? To be judged positively. So think about think about that and try to channel that energy into something positive. Just like if you're a performer and you have stage fright, that's good adrenaline. That's excitement. Start out with walk onto the stage, walk into the front of the room, smile, thank people for being there, etc. And then that'll help you kind of get started. Last thing is he says to say thank you when you're done. So that's I'm a fan of that when it comes to at the very end of presentation saying thank you and showing gratitude. So those are just 7 tips. Again, I would really encourage you to watch Simon Sinek's videos because he's incredibly important and he's a valuable speaker to watch. Last thing I want to mention is I've posted a document in our Blackboard site under Killer Handouts that's about delivery do's and don'ts. And so read through that. You'll notice that many of those apply to a in-person speech situation. So bear that in mind. But many of them will also apply to an online setting. So let those be a good handout for you to use and some tips and tricks. And also, it's all about practice. Practice what works for you. Work with your natural body language, your natural movements, and those types of things. And over time, with practice, you will get better at it. The last thing I want to mention as far as a resource to use is Amy Cuddy. I've posted one of her videos in our Blackboard site as well, and she talks about the power of nonverbal communication. And one of her tips is to do a power pose. And so a power pose is something that puts you in a relaxed situation where you feel confident, you feel in power. So a power pose could be something like this: standing in front of the room doing this, going into the bathroom and doing this for 2 minutes before a presentation. A power pose can also just be sitting back comfortably and taking up space and getting relaxed. So it's a little bit silly to think about doing that, but students do that every semester and they swear it works. So it's all about getting yourself comfortable. So I'll leave you with that. Do whatever works for you. Keep practicing. I'll see you next time in the next video.